I watched my own son steal $47,000 from my account while I pretended to sleep in the hospital bed, and that's when I knew my family wanted me dead. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My name is Harold Garrett. I'm 68 years old, and for the past 15 years I thought I was living the American dream as a respected patriarch. I had built a successful construction business from nothing, owned 3 rental properties in Denver, and had what I believed was a loving family. My son Michael, 34, worked in my company as operations manager, and his wife Jennifer handled our family's bookkeeping. My daughter Sarah lived in California with her husband, but we talked every Sunday. Everything changed on March 15, 2019, when I had my mild heart attack. I was lying in Denver General Hospital, room 314, when I heard Michael and Jennifer whispering by the window. I kept my eyes closed, still groggy from the medication, when I heard Jennifer say, "The power of attorney papers are ready. Once we get him to sign them, we can start moving the assets." Michael replied, "He's getting weaker. The doctor said his memory might be affected by the stress. Perfect timing." That conversation hit me like ice water. I remained perfectly still, controlling my breathing, as they discussed their plan to gradually transfer my properties and business shares while convincing everyone I was developing dementia. Jennifer had already forged several checks, they said, testing whether I'd notice. I hadn't, but not because I was losing my mind. I had simply trusted them completely. For 3 days, I played the role of the confused, recovering patient while gathering information. I listened carefully to every conversation, every phone call they made from my room. Michael called someone named Peterson about expediting the transfer process. Jennifer spoke to a real estate agent about preparing for a quick sale when the time comes. On March 18th, when Dr. Martinez came for rounds, I asked him privately about my cognitive state. "Mr. Garrett," he said, "your mind is as sharp as ever. This was a minor cardiac event, and your recovery is excellent." That confirmed what I already knew. My family wasn't protecting me from decline. They were orchestrating my downfall. The moment of absolute clarity came that evening when Michael brought legal documents disguised as insurance paperwork. As I pretended to struggle reading them, I saw they were comprehensive power of attorney forms that would give him control over everything I'd built in 40 years of work. I signed them with a shaky hand, playing the weakened father perfectly, while my mind calculated my next moves. That night, I realized 3 crucial things. First, my family had been planning this for months. Second, they genuinely believed I was becoming vulnerable and wouldn't fight back. And third, I had been systematically underestimating their greed while overestimating their love. I decided to become invisible to them while gathering evidence. The next morning, I told them I wanted to rest at home quietly and wouldn't need much help, just some groceries delivered. This was exactly what they wanted, an isolated, dependent old man they could control from a distance. But Harold Garrett didn't build a multi-million-dollar business by being anyone's fool. Back home, I transformed from trusting father to methodical investigator. My first stop was my home office, where I kept physical copies of every financial document. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Over the past 8 months, Jennifer had been systematically siphoning money through what appeared to be legitimate business expenses, invoices for equipment maintenance and contractor payments that I now realized were completely fabricated. The Peterson Group, mentioned in Michael's phone call, was a shell company she'd created. Every invoice was perfectly formatted, with fake letterheads and professional language that had fooled me completely. The rental properties were already in jeopardy. Jennifer had stopped paying property taxes on 2 of them, claiming the tenants were behind on rent. I called my tenants directly, something I hadn't done in months, trusting her reports. Mrs. Rodriguez from the Lakewood property was shocked. "Mr. Garrett, I've been current on rent every month. I send the checks directly to your daughter-in-law, like always." That evening, I drove to my office building after hours, using my master key. In Jennifer's desk, hidden behind a false back panel I'd installed years ago for document security, I found a folder labeled HG Transition Plan, Inside were property appraisals, bank account transfers scheduled for the following month, and correspondence with elder law attorney Rebecca Martinez about managing assets for a declining parent. The most damaging document was a psychological evaluation request, dated 2 weeks before my heart attack. They'd been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. The doctor they'd contacted, Dr. Stevens, had a reputation for providing convenient diagnoses for families seeking control over elderly relatives' estates. I photographed everything with my phone, then replaced the documents exactly as I'd found them. My hands didn't shake anymore. The initial shock had crystallized into focused determination. The next morning, I visited my longtime banker, Charles Harrison, at First National. We'd done business for 22 years, and his reaction confirmed my worst fears. "Harold," he said quietly, "I was wondering when you'd come in. We've had some unusual activity on your accounts. Large transfers that seemed, well, different from your usual patterns." Charles showed me statements I'd never seen. In 6 months, nearly $180,000 had been moved from my primary business account to various entities. The Garrett construction payroll had increased by 40%, with new employees I'd never heard of. Jennifer had been paying herself and several fictional workers substantial salaries. Most disturbing was the mortgage taken against my primary residence, my home of 30 years. Jennifer had used the power of attorney I'd stupidly signed after my first wife's death in 2015 to secure a $320,000 loan against the property. The money had vanished into investment accounts I couldn't access. "Charles," I said, "I need to understand something. How long would it typically take for someone to completely liquidate my assets if they had full power of attorney?" His answer chilled me. "With the right paperwork and a cooperative court system, 60 to 90 days, especially if there's documentation of cognitive decline." That afternoon, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal and realized they'd planned to strip me of everything I'd built, then likely place me in a care facility where I'd be safely out of the way. The timeline was clear. They'd expected my heart attack recovery to provide the perfect cover for their final moves. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed I'd remain the passive, trusting father who'd never question their actions. Instead, they'd awakened to something far more dangerous, a strategic mind with nothing left to lose, and all the time in the world to plan their downfall. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything systematically. This was no longer about family loyalty or forgiveness. This was war, and I intended to win decisively. Within 48 hours of my discovery, I executed the first phase of my counteroffensive. I contacted my estate attorney, Thomas Wright, whom I'd used for business contracts but kept separate from family matters. His office was across town, far from Michael and Jennifer's usual haunts. Thomas reviewed my evidence with the clinical precision I needed. "Harold, this constitutes elder financial abuse, fraud, and identity theft. The documentation you've gathered is compelling, but we need to secure your remaining assets immediately before they can complete their plan." We established a new banking relationship with Colorado Springs National Bank, 2 hours from Denver. I transferred my remaining liquid assets, approximately $240,000 they hadn't yet discovered, into accounts requiring dual authentication that couldn't be compromised by power of attorney documents. Thomas helped me create a revocable trust structure that would protect my properties from future fraudulent transfers. The most critical step was revoking the power of attorney I'd granted after Margaret's death. Thomas filed the revocation with the county clerk, but we delayed serving notice to Michael and Jennifer. This gave me a window where they'd continue believing they had legal control while actually possessing worthless documents. During this period, I maintained my role as the recovering, somewhat confused patriarch. I attended family dinners, asked simple questions about the business, and praised Jennifer's careful handling of the finances. Michael would pat my shoulder condescendingly while discussing plans to simplify my living situation soon. My investigation expanded beyond financial records. I hired private investigator Lisa Chen, recommended by Thomas for her expertise in family fraud cases. Within a week, she provided disturbing intelligence about my children's private communications and spending patterns. Michael had been telling friends and business associates that I was losing my grip and that he'd soon be taking full control of Garrett Construction. He'd already approached 3 of my major clients about continuing contracts under his management. Jennifer had been shopping for luxury vehicles and had put a deposit on a vacation home in Aspen, purchases clearly funded by my stolen money. Most painfully, Lisa discovered that my daughter Sarah in California knew about their scheme. Phone records showed regular conversations between Sarah and Michael discussing Dad's situation and how to manage the transition smoothly. She hadn't warned me or tried to intervene. Instead, she'd been calculating her share of the inheritance they expected to control. The betrayal was complete. All 3 of my children had written me off as a senile obstacle to their financial ambitions. On April 10th, exactly 3 weeks after my heart attack, I received the call I'd been expecting. Dr. Stevens' office scheduled a routine cognitive assessment for the following week. This was their endgame. They'd use a predetermined diagnosis of dementia to justify their actions and gain permanent control over my affairs. That evening, I made my decision. I would disappear from their lives entirely, but not before ensuring they faced consequences for their crimes. I began liquidating assets they didn't know existed, old business partnerships, mineral rights from a land deal in Wyoming, and collectible items I'd accumulated over decades. I contacted my most trusted business associate, Frank Morrison, who'd moved to Phoenix after retiring. Frank had been my partner in several ventures and had always maintained strict confidentiality about our dealings. He agreed to help me establish residency in Arizona while maintaining legal addresses in Colorado for ongoing litigation purposes. The genius of my plan was its simplicity. Rather than confronting them directly and giving them opportunity to destroy evidence or create new lies, I would vanish completely. They'd celebrate initially, thinking they'd successfully driven me away, but their celebration would be short-lived. My preparations accelerated. I gathered personal items gradually, storing them in a safety deposit box in Colorado Springs. I arranged for mail forwarding through a private service that would mask my actual location. Most importantly, I documented everything they continued doing in my absence. Every fraudulent transaction, every lie they told others about my condition, every step they took to steal what I'd spent my lifetime building. By the end of April, Harold Garrett, the vulnerable widower, would cease to exist. In his place would emerge someone far more dangerous, a man with nothing to lose, unlimited time for planning, and absolute determination to see justice served. They wanted me gone from their lives. I was about to grant that wish in ways they never anticipated. Phoenix became my base of operations. Frank Morrison helped me purchase a modest condo in Scottsdale under a trust arrangement that kept my name off public records. The desert climate reminded me of simpler times, and the distance from Colorado gave me the clarity needed for long-term strategic thinking. My first priority was assembling a legal team that specialized in elder fraud prosecution. Through Thomas Wright's referrals, I connected with Amanda Rodriguez, a federal prosecutor turned private attorney who'd built her reputation dismantling complex financial fraud schemes. Her Phoenix office became my war room. Amanda reviewed my documentation with forensic accountants from her firm. The scope of theft exceeded even my estimates. Over $450,000 had been systematically stolen through forged checks, fake invoices, unauthorized loans, and phantom employees. The mortgage against my home represented another $320,000 in fraudulent debt that I was technically liable for, unless we could prove coercion. "Harold," Amanda explained, "we're not just dealing with family theft. This is organized criminal activity involving multiple felonies across state lines. The shell companies Jennifer created, the fake business entities, the coordinated deception. This meets federal fraud statutes." She introduced me to her partner, Marcus Chen, a former FBI white-collar crimes investigator. Marcus specialized in asset recovery and had connections throughout the banking industry that would prove invaluable. Together, They outlined a prosecution strategy that would systematically dismantle everything Michael and Jennifer had built while ensuring maximum asset recovery. The psychological warfare began immediately. I instructed my Phoenix team to hire David Sterling, a private investigation firm with offices in Denver. Their assignment was surveillance and intelligence gathering on my family's activities. Within days, they confirmed that Michael and Jennifer believed their plan was proceeding perfectly. Jennifer had scheduled the cognitive assessment with Dr. Stevens for May 15th. She'd already contacted Sunset Manor, an expensive assisted living facility, about emergency placement for a family member experiencing rapid mental decline. The monthly fees were $8,000, money they planned to pay using my assets while keeping me isolated and controllable. Marcus discovered something even more disturbing through his banking contacts. Michael had approached 2 different lenders about expanding the mortgage debt on my properties. He'd presented doctored medical records suggesting I was mentally incompetent and needed funds for specialized care. One bank had already pre-approved an additional $200,000 loan against the Lakewood rental property. The timeline became clear. They intended to warehouse me in Sunset Manor, while systematically liquidating every asset I owned. The facility had a reputation for heavily medicating residents and limiting family contact, perfect for their needs. My counter-strategy required patience and precision. Rather than stopping their immediate actions, I decided to let them continue digging their legal graves while building an airtight case for prosecution. Amanda obtained court orders freezing the accounts they didn't know I'd discovered, while leaving their primary theft vehicles operational under surveillance. We established monitoring systems on all my compromised accounts. Every fraudulent transaction would be documented in real time, with automatic notifications to our legal team. They could continue stealing, but now every theft was evidence in a federal case that would destroy them. The personal betrayal cut deepest when David Sterling's team intercepted communications between Sarah and her siblings. She'd been coordinating with Michael about dividing my assets after the placement at Sunset Manor. Her husband, Robert, was researching California estate laws to maximize their inheritance claims. My California daughter, whom I'd supported through college and helped purchase her first home, was actively participating in plans to steal everything I'd worked for. But betrayal brought clarity. These weren't my children anymore. They were criminals who happened to share my DNA. The family loyalty that had blinded me to their early theft attempts was gone, replaced by cold determination to see justice served completely. In early May, I received intelligence that changed everything. Marcus learned that Jennifer had contacted Dr. Stevens about expediting my cognitive assessment because the patient's condition was deteriorating rapidly. She was pushing for immediate competency hearings that would fast-track their control over my affairs. They were accelerating their timeline, which meant I needed to accelerate mine. Amanda filed sealed federal complaints that would remain invisible until we were ready to strike. Marcus positioned asset recovery specialists throughout Colorado's banking system. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. On May 10th, 5 days before their planned assessment, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of remaining hidden in Phoenix, I would return to Denver, not as the confused, helpless victim they expected, but as the architect of their destruction. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and they had no idea what was coming for them. My return to Denver was calculated and methodical. I rented a furnished apartment downtown under Frank Morrison's business name, maintaining complete separation from my family's knowledge while positioning myself for the final phase. The cognitive assessment was scheduled for May 15th, and I intended to be present, though not in the way they expected. Meanwhile, my Phoenix investments had exceeded all projections. With Amanda's guidance, I'd diversified my protected assets across technology stocks, real estate investment trusts, and municipal bonds. The $240,000 I'd salvaged had grown to $312,000 in just 6 weeks. My family had stolen nearly $500,000 while I was building wealth they couldn't touch. Marcus Chen's surveillance team provided daily intelligence reports that revealed the full scope of their operation. Jennifer had expanded beyond simple theft to creating an elaborate financial ecosystem designed to drain every penny I possessed. She'd established 4 additional shell companies, each with professional websites and fake customer testimonials. The invoices she generated for my construction business were so sophisticated that even experienced accountants might have missed the fraud. The most audacious discovery came when David Sterling's team infiltrated Jennifer's email communications. She'd been corresponding with elderly care facilities across 3 states, shopping for the cheapest possible placement while researching which facilities had the least oversight. Her goal wasn't quality care. It was maximum isolation at minimum cost, leaving more stolen money for her personal use. Michael had proven equally ambitious. He'd contacted my insurance agent about increasing my life insurance benefits, claiming I'd requested the changes due to health concerns. The agent, thankfully, had required my personal signature and had been unable to reach me directly, stalling the application. Their plan included ensuring my death would provide maximum financial benefit while minimizing their ongoing responsibilities. On May 12th, 3 days before the assessment, I implemented the next phase of my counter-strategy. Amanda's team initiated civil asset forfeiture proceedings against the shell companies, freezing their accounts under federal anti-fraud statutes. Simultaneously, Marcus triggered forensic audits of every financial institution where they'd moved my money. The beauty of federal law enforcement is its reach and permanence. Unlike local police investigations that might be influenced by personal relationships or limited resources, federal prosecutors have unlimited jurisdiction and extensive powers. Every transaction they'd made was now part of a permanent federal record that would follow them for life. But the personal preparation proved equally important. Through private investigators in California, I'd learned that Sarah and her husband Robert had already spent $85,000 of anticipated inheritance money on a luxury renovation of their Malibu home. They'd taken loans secured against the house, confident that my assets would cover their debts once I was declared incompetent. Robert worked for a tech company and had been researching legal frameworks for challenging competency determinations. He'd found precedents where families had successfully overturned court decisions by proving elder abuse or undue influence. The irony was perfect. They were researching defenses against exactly the crimes they were committing. I spent those final days before the assessment establishing my own psychological baseline. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a geriatric psychiatrist in Phoenix, conducted comprehensive cognitive testing that documented my complete mental competency. Her detailed report would serve as evidence that any contrary findings from Dr. Stevens were fraudulent. The anticipation grew unbearable as May 15th approached. Jennifer had been calling my disconnected home phone daily, leaving increasingly panicked messages about missing our important medical appointment. She'd contacted hospitals asking if I'd been admitted anywhere, worried that their timeline might be disrupted. On May 14th, the evening before their planned assessment, I received intelligence that forced me to accelerate my timeline completely. Marcus learned that Michael had scheduled a meeting with Sunset Manor's administrators for May 16th, the day after the assessment. He planned to place me immediately before I could potentially contact anyone who might intervene. Their confidence was absolute. Jennifer had already signed documents transferring ownership of my business equipment to herself, backdated to appear as if I'd authorized the transactions months earlier. She'd researched estate planning attorneys who specialized in rapid probate proceedings, preparing to challenge any will I might have left that didn't benefit them exclusively. The final piece of intelligence came from David Sterling's team that evening. They'd intercepted a phone conversation between Michael and an unknown associate discussing cleaning up loose ends after my placement. The associate mentioned that elderly residents at certain facilities sometimes didn't last long due to the stress of transition and medication adjustments. That conversation eliminated any remaining doubt about their intentions. They weren't just planning to steal my money and warehouse me. They were actively hoping I'd die quickly to finalize their inheritance. My own children were discussing scenarios where my death would solve their problems permanently. That night, I sat in my downtown apartment overlooking the Denver skyline I'd helped build through decades of construction projects and realized that tomorrow would either vindicate 40 years of hard work or represent the complete destruction of everything I'd accomplished. But Harold Garrett had never backed down from a fight, especially when he held all the winning cards. Tomorrow, my family would learn exactly what kind of man they'd underestimated, and why that mistake would cost them everything they'd thought they'd stolen from me. May 15th arrived with crystalline clarity. At exactly 9:47 a.m., as Jennifer and Michael sat in Dr. Stevens' waiting room expecting to rubber stamp my cognitive decline, federal agents simultaneously executed search warrants at their homes, my construction company offices, and Jennifer's shell company addresses. Amanda Rodriguez had coordinated the timing perfectly. They would learn about my competency in the most devastating way possible. I watched the proceedings unfold from Amanda's downtown office, connected via secure video feeds to the various raid locations. Jennifer's face when FBI agent Patricia Collins presented the warrant was worth every sleepless night I'd endured planning this moment. She immediately called Michael, screaming that someone must have hacked our accounts, and demanding he come home immediately. Michael's reaction proved even more satisfying. When agents arrived at the construction company, he was in my old office, sitting behind my desk, already acting as if he owned everything. Agent Collins later told me his exact words were, "There must be some mistake. My father is mentally incompetent, and I have full authority here." The irony was perfect. He was claiming mental incompetence for a man who had orchestrated his downfall from 2 states away. Dr. Stevens' office became chaos when federal marshals arrived to secure his patient records and investigate his role in the conspiracy. The cognitive assessment appointment was canceled permanently, along with Dr. Stevens' medical license pending investigation of his history, with convenient elder competency rulings. But the real psychological warfare began that afternoon. Through Marcus Chen's contacts, I arranged for Jennifer to receive a call from Colorado Springs National Bank, the institution where I'd hidden my protected assets. The banker, following our script perfectly, informed her that Harold Garrett had personally visited the bank that morning to discuss irregularities in his Denver accounts and had provided extensive documentation of unauthorized transactions. Jennifer's panic was immediate and complete. She called Michael repeatedly, then tried reaching Sarah in California. None of them could locate me, and the realization that I wasn't the confused victim they'd imagined was destroying their confidence. They'd built their entire strategy around controlling a helpless old man, never considering that I might be actively working against them. The federal investigation moved with machine-like precision. Amanda's team had prepared comprehensive financial forensics that traced every stolen dollar through multiple accounts and shell companies. The evidence was so overwhelming that even Jennifer's attempts to destroy records became additional obstruction charges. Sarah's involvement became public when California authorities executed their own warrants based on interstate fraud charges. Her husband Robert was arrested at his tech company while attempting to delete files from his work computer, files that contained research about exploiting elderly family members and hiding assets from federal authorities. The Malibu home renovation they'd financed with my anticipated inheritance money became a federal asset seizure. Every improvement they'd made using stolen funds would be liquidated to compensate my losses. Robert's employer terminated him immediately when the charges became public, destroying his tech career permanently. Meanwhile, I continued building my new life in Phoenix. The investment portfolio Amanda had structured was generating consistent returns, and I'd begun consulting with other construction companies on major projects. My expertise remained valuable, and my reputation in the industry was untouched by my family's criminal activities. The psychological pressure on my children intensified daily. They couldn't contact me directly, couldn't locate my assets, and couldn't stop the federal investigation that was dismantling their lives systematically. Every lawyer they consulted delivered the same verdict. The evidence was overwhelming, and cooperation with prosecutors was their only hope for reduced sentences. By late May, the desperation reached its peak. Michael had been forced to close Garrett Construction when federal asset freezes prevented him from accessing operating capital. The employees I'd worked with for years were losing their jobs because of his theft, and several had contacted authorities offering testimony about suspicious activities they'd witnessed. Jennifer's situation was even worse. The IRS had launched parallel investigations into her unreported income from the shell companies, creating tax evasion charges on top of the federal fraud counts. Her luxury purchases were being repossessed one by one, and she faced potential decades in federal prison. The breaking point came on May 28th, exactly 6 weeks after my heart attack had started this entire sequence of events. Through intermediaries, they located Thomas Wright's office and begged him to arrange a meeting with me. Their message was pathetic. They claimed everything had been a misunderstanding and that they'd only been trying to protect me from financial complexity during my recovery. Thomas relayed their desperation with professional detachment. They were offering to return whatever money might have been accidentally mishandled in exchange for my dropping all charges. They still didn't understand that this was never about money. It was about justice for their complete betrayal of my trust and their casual planning of my death. The final intelligence report from David Sterling's team revealed that they'd been researching witness protection programs and international banking systems. They were planning to flee the country rather than face the consequences of their actions. This possibility required immediate response. It was time to close the trap completely and ensure they faced American justice for their American crimes. On May 30th, I authorized Amanda to make my first direct contact with my family since disappearing. The message was simple. I was alive, mentally competent, and fully aware of everything they'd done. More importantly, I was ready to hear their explanation for why they'd planned to kill me after stealing everything I'd built. Their response would determine whether they faced decades in federal prison or merely years. But either way, Harold Garrett was finished being anyone's victim. The call came at 2:15 p.m. on June 3rd, exactly 12 weeks after my heart attack had triggered their scheme. Amanda Rodriguez and I were in her Phoenix office reviewing the final prosecution recommendations when my secure phone rang. The number displayed was Michael's cell phone, the first direct contact attempt since my disappearance. I activated the recording equipment Amanda had installed and answered on the 4th ring, keeping my voice steady and neutral. "Hello, Michael." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds before he spoke, and when he did, his voice was broken, desperate, completely different from the confident son who had dismissed me as a burden. Dad, where are you? We've been looking everywhere. We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied, offering nothing more. Amanda nodded approvingly from across the desk. Every word of this conversation would become evidence in the federal case. "Dad, there's been some kind of mistake. The FBI, they came to our houses. They took our computers. They're saying we stole money from you. But you know that's not true, right? We were just trying to help manage things while you were sick." The audacity was breathtaking. Even with federal agents dismantling their lives, he was still attempting to manipulate me with lies. "Tell me about the Peterson Group, Michael. Explain those invoices Jennifer created for equipment we never purchased." Another long silence. Then, barely audible, "How do you—" "Dad, your memory, the doctors said you were having problems." "Which doctors, Michael?" "Dr. Stevens, the man who's now under federal investigation for providing fraudulent competency evaluations? The same doctor Jennifer scheduled me to see without my knowledge." My voice remained calm, but each question was designed to demonstrate that I knew everything. I heard Jennifer's voice in the background, hysterical. "Tell him we'll give everything back. Tell him we're sorry. We didn't mean for this to happen." Michael's composure cracked completely. "Dad, please, you have to understand. We thought you were getting confused and we were worried about people taking advantage of you. We were trying to protect the family assets by stealing $450,000, by forging my signature on mortgage documents, by researching facilities where I might die quickly from medication adjustments." The sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected me to know about that last conversation. Marcus Chen's surveillance had captured everything, and Michael was realizing the scope of evidence against them. "Dad, that's not... We never said anything about Jennifer. What is he talking about?" but his voice carried the knowledge that they'd been caught completely. Jennifer grabbed the phone, sobbing openly. "Harold, please, I'm so sorry. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. We can make it right. Just tell us where you are, let us come see you, and we'll figure this out together." "You mean like we figured out the Sunset Manor placement together? The facility where you plan to warehouse me while spending my money on luxury vacations in Aspen?" Her crying intensified. We weren't. Harold, you're my family, I would never hurt you. This is all just a misunderstanding that got out of control." The desperation was complete now. But what struck me most was the absence of genuine remorse. They weren't sorry for betraying me. They were sorry for getting caught. Every apology was calculated to minimize their legal exposure, not to acknowledge the depth of their betrayal. "Let me ask you something, Jennifer. When you scheduled that cognitive assessment with Dr. Stevens, what exactly did you expect to happen afterwards?" The doctor said you might need some help managing complex financial decisions, and after he declared me incompetent. What was the next step in your plan?" The silence stretched until Michael returned to the phone. "Dad, we love you. We were trying to protect you. If there were mistakes made, we can fix them. Just give us a chance to make this right. The way you protected me when you told your friends I was losing my grip. The way you protected me when you put a deposit on that Aspen vacation home using my stolen money. Each revelation hit them like physical blows. They hadn't considered that their private conversations and confidential actions might be documented and recorded. The invisible, vulnerable father they'd dismissed had been watching and listening to everything. "Dad," Michael's voice was barely a whisper now. "What do you want from us? What can we do to fix this?" That question revealed everything I needed to know about their character. Even in complete defeat, they still believed this was a negotiation, that consequences could be avoided through the right combination of words and promises. They couldn't conceive that their actions had permanent, irreversible results. "I want you to understand something, Michael. When you said we're better off without you, you were absolutely correct. You are better off without me, better off without my money, my properties, my business, and my trust. You wanted independence from your burdensome father, and I'm granting that independence permanently." Jennifer's wailing became audible through the phone as the finality of my words sank in. They'd expected tears, forgiveness, and negotiation. Instead, they were receiving the cold justice they'd earned through months of calculated betrayal. "Dad, please, we need you. The business is failing. The FBI froze our accounts. Sarah and Robert were arrested in California. We don't know how to fix this without your help. You needed me when you were stealing from me, not now that you're facing consequences. The time for needing me ended when you planned my death as a convenient solution to your inheritance timeline." The call ended with their desperate pleas echoing in Amanda's office. I turned off the recording equipment and looked at my attorney, who was smiling with professional satisfaction. "Harold," she said, "that conversation just eliminated any possibility of a plea bargain. They've admitted to financial mismanagement, while demonstrating zero genuine remorse. The federal prosecutor will use this recording to ensure maximum sentences." Outside Amanda's windows, the Phoenix sun was setting over a landscape that represented my new beginning. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, where I would address my children one last time before they disappeared into the federal prison system for the next decade of their lives. They had called begging for mercy they'd never shown me. Now they would learn what justice looked like when delivered by a man they'd underestimated completely. The video conference was scheduled for June 10th at 10:05 a.m. Mountain Time. Amanda had arranged the secure connection through federal court systems, ensuring every word would be permanently recorded and legally binding. Michael, Jennifer, and Sarah would participate from the federal courthouse in Denver, flanked by their court-appointed attorneys and federal marshals. I sat in Amanda's conference room, wearing a crisp navy suit, looking healthier and more focused than I had in years. The months of stress had given way to clarity of purpose, and my appearance would send an unmistakable message. Harold Garrett was very much alive, completely competent, and absolutely in control. When the connection activated, the contrast was stark. My 3 children looked haggard, defeated, aged beyond their years by months of legal pressure and financial ruin. Jennifer had lost significant weight, her previously polished appearance replaced by the hollow-eyed look of someone facing decades in federal prison. Michael's confident demeanor had crumbled entirely. He sat hunched forward, unable to make eye contact with the camera. Sarah appeared via separate connection from California, her Malibu lifestyle destroyed by asset seizures and her husband's imprisonment. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying the authority I'd developed through 40 years of business leadership. "I want to address each of you directly about the choices you made and their consequences." Jennifer immediately began sobbing, but I continued without pause. "Jennifer, you created 4 shell companies, forged 37 checks totaling $127,000, and submitted fake invoices worth $298,000. You researched facilities where elderly patients die quickly from medication complications. These aren't mistakes or misunderstandings. They're calculated crimes that destroyed any relationship we might have salvaged." Her attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm as she attempted to speak, but I wasn't finished. "Michael, you told associates I was losing my grip while planning to liquidate assets worth $1.2 million. You scheduled meetings with care facilities designed to warehouse me permanently while you spent my money on luxury purchases. When you said, 'We're better off without you,' you revealed your true feelings about your father's value to your life." Michael's face crumpled, but decades of disappointment had immunized me against manipulation through tears. "Sarah, you coordinated with your siblings to divide my assets while researching legal strategies to challenge any resistance I might offer. You spent $85,000 of anticipated inheritance money on home renovations, confident that your mentally incompetent father would never discover your participation in this conspiracy." The federal prosecutor, Janet Morrison, had positioned herself beside Amanda to observe their reactions during my statement. Every expression, every gesture was being analyzed for sentencing recommendations that would determine their next decade. "I want you to understand the scope of what you attempted," I continued. "You didn't just steal money. You conspired to eliminate my autonomy, my dignity, and ultimately my life. The conversations Marcus Chen recorded demonstrate that you viewed my death as a convenient solution to inheritance complications." Jennifer's attorney finally spoke. "Mr. Garrett, my client deeply regrets her actions and hopes to make amends through restitution and community service." "Counselor," I replied, "your client researched fatal medication dosages for elderly patients in care facilities. Regret doesn't resurrect victims of elder abuse, and restitution doesn't restore trust broken by children planning their parents' death." The finality in my voice silenced further legal maneuvering. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a sentencing hearing where I would deliver the verdict their actions had earned. "Here are the permanent consequences of your choices. First, all stolen assets have been recovered and placed in trusts that none of you can access. Second, my will has been updated to exclude each of you entirely. Every dollar I've earned will benefit charitable organizations focused on elder abuse prevention. Third, I am relocating permanently, and you will never receive my contact information or location." Sarah found her voice for the first time. "Dad, we made mistakes, but we're still your children. Doesn't that mean anything?" "Sarah, children protect their parents, support their recovery, and respect their autonomy. What you did was eliminate an obstacle to your financial ambitions. You chose money over family. Now you'll have neither." The emotional manipulation I'd endured for months no longer affected me. They'd revealed their true nature through their actions, and consequences would follow accordingly. The federal sentences you'll receive reflect the seriousness of organized financial fraud against elderly victims. Jennifer faces 12 to 15 years for her leadership role in creating the criminal enterprise. Michael faces 8 to 12 years for conspiracy and elder abuse. Sarah and Robert face 6 to 10 years for interstate fraud and money laundering. The weight of those numbers settled over the conference room like lead. They'd gambled my life savings and freedom against federal prosecution, and they'd lost completely. I spent 68 years building a life, a business, and what I believed was a loving family. You destroyed that family through greed and betrayal, but you couldn't destroy me. Harold Garrett survived your conspiracy and built something better in its place. Amanda concluded the conference with legal formalities about plea bargaining deadlines and sentencing hearings, but the real business was finished. I had looked into the eyes of my children one final time and delivered the justice their actions demanded. After disconnecting, I sat quietly in Amanda's office, feeling neither satisfaction nor grief, only the calm clarity that comes from completing a necessary task. They would spend the next decade in federal prison while I continued building the life they'd tried to steal. That evening, from my Phoenix balcony overlooking the desert mountains, I reflected on the transformation their betrayal had triggered. The trusting, naive father who'd signed power of attorney documents without reading them was gone forever. In his place stood a man who understood that family loyalty must be earned through actions, not assumed through genetics. 3 months later, I received word that all three had accepted plea bargains rather than face trial. Jennifer received 14 years, Michael received 10, and Sarah received 8. Their sentences would serve as warnings to other families considering elder abuse as inheritance acceleration. I never saw or spoke to any of them again. Harold Garrett had built a new life from the ashes of their betrayal. Wealthier, wiser, and surrounded by people who earned my trust through demonstrated loyalty, rather than claimed it through shared DNA. Sometimes the family you choose proves more valuable than the family you're born with. That lesson, learned at 68, gave me the best years of my life. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.